Hi, podcast listeners. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. We have so many guests on this show making a difference in our lives, making a difference all around the world with the expertise that they bring. And yet so many of you are reaching out to me saying, you want more. It's not enough just what we're putting on these podcast episodes for you. And so I am here to extend a very warm welcome to you to our Difference Maker community, where you can join for as little as $5 a month to get all this extra content. Out the gate, you're going to get 30 plus minisodes of exclusive content not available for the regular podcast listeners, and an exclusive minisode every month. And you'll get exclusive voting power to help us pick podcast topics and more. And that's at our Changers tier. There's 3 different main tiers and then an extra larger tier. But whatever tier that you join at, you will be included in this extra content. And I know that many of you are wanting to go a little bit deeper. And so even though it gets a little wild in there sometimes because of how deep we go, I want you to join us there. This extra content is very special. It means a great deal to me to be a part of this community with you. And I would love to just exchange ideas or perspectives that you have around these different episodes. And that's the place where we do it. So please show up to our Difference Maker community. Give us $5 out of your pocket every month. And I think that you'll have a lot of fun in there because we do. And I would love for you to join us. So go to patreon.com/A World of Difference to join us there. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Our guest today is Tim Fortescue. Tim has a doctorate in leadership from Gateway Seminary. He formerly served as the West Coast coordinator for Global Gates, based here in the Bay Area, which is where I originally met him years ago. And now he is a board certified coach for IFS, which is Internal Family Systems. And he's going to be speaking to us today about what this whole process looks like that he takes his clients through. And as we're in this emotionally healthy focus of our series, the IFS Institute and all of the trainers involved with IFS have really made an impact on my life personally and my husband and many people that I know who have found that this particular system of walking through our emotions throughout our lives until now really helps us with a lot of curiosity and less judgment around our own emotions and helps us move forward in a healthier way. So Tim is coming on today to sort of explain what this IFS system is like, and also to help us understand, each of us who listen today, how we can take some of these tools in our own lives and move forward in a healthier way. And I hope that you find this content both helpful even as you're listening, and it also spurs you on to want to go deeper as you think about what you want to put into place in your life over the next several months to help you become a more emotionally healthy and happier person wherever you are in the world. I know a lot of us are doing very difficult work, making a difference wherever we are. And Tim is a person who has worked very hard here in the Bay Area, working with Afghan refugees for many years. And now he's in a space where he's helping people move forward in healthier ways through his coaching. So a very warm welcome to Dr. Tim Fortescue. Hi, Tim. A very warm welcome today to the A World of Difference podcast.
Well, thanks. I'm glad for the opportunity to be here, Lori. Thank you.
Me too. I've known you for a few years, and you moved away and left us in the Bay Area all alone without you. How are things going where you are today?
Things are going well. Yeah, we're settling in. And so for those that don't know, I'm in Wisconsin. My wife is from this area. We were in the Bay Area almost 20 years and have been here, getting close to 2 years. And we're settling in, getting into a rhythm, but enjoying life here.
So glad that you guys are thriving there. I know it was a huge change for your family, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those changes for you today as we kind of get into this. But I think that for anybody listening, if you've gone through a career change, if you're struggling with things in your own life about unpacking anything in your own childhood or history or how your lived experience has been. That's one of the reasons we brought you on today, Tim, is to talk about kind of your background and how you got it started into the field of IFS coaching. So, want to give us a little bit of introduction about who you are and kind of what you're currently doing?
Yeah, and it can get quite complicated if I let it, so I'll try not to do that. But I grew up in South Carolina and was there for about the first 20 years of my life. Come from a family just the southern tip of Appalachia, and was the first to break a lot of the cycles that can come out of that for bad or for good, and was the first that went to college, and went to a small Southern Baptist school up in the upper part of the state. Great school. Honestly, it was not so great at the time and helped me get in, so I was grateful for that. And so went away to college, and it was there that I found out about summer internships with various missions programs. And so signed up for California, Hawaii, and Alaska to go as far away as I could in North America on my free ride, and ended up ultimately in the Bay Area. Had some cross-cultural experiences overseas in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan and Taiwan. But that college just opened up my mind. And so I ended up moving to San Francisco after college to go to seminary, and then was there 20 years, almost 20 years of my life doing ministry to a large Afghan population in that area. And then recently, in the last couple of years, have made another transition here to Wisconsin. But we can talk a little more about my experience. Let you ask me some questions, though.
Sure. Well, I mean, some people are in this space, and you've sort of already made the jump of going from what is sort of we call full-time paid ministry into something different like coaching. And you have chosen IFS coaching, which I personally have benefited from when I was in Caneo cohort, which just finished. My particular cohort leader was trained in IFS, Sid, and she used a lot of that with us. We also have Becky Castle Miller, who's going to be preceding you in the podcast lineup here on the podcast. And she's also an IFS coach. And I know my husband has also been working through some of this with you. And so sort of help us understand, why did you decide to become an IFS coach? Why did you choose that particular route? And how has that been going for you so far with your clients?
Yeah. And just to briefly with my IFS journey. So I took a sabbatical about 3 years ago, and my ministry after seminary has been more in the missions world, evangelical world focus, and I'm grateful for that upbringing and where it brought me. There's still a lot of good work being done there, and God is at work there. But for me, just IFS has put spirituality on a more neutral framework where I can still accept the parts of me that love Jesus, that are even though there are parts of me that are ashamed to bring it up, that are kind of evangelical, like sharing good news. But IFS put that spirituality on a neutral framework where I can be who I am and not be ashamed of that. But other people can engage their faith and spirituality in freedom, non-judgment, in that compassion and curiosity. And so this IFS coaching has given me the opportunity to accept my cross-cultural skills and experience, my upbringing, and my faith, and bring those worlds together so that I can engage the world, but with no agenda, but just seeking to help people access more of that self-compassion, self-energy.
It's so beautiful, especially for so many who have experienced religious trauma. And I know a lot of you listening have. And so I know a lot of people often refer to the Inside Out movie as a great one to understand sort of what we're talking about with IFS, that we have all these different feelings, and to express curiosity within ourselves and self-compassion is a really good way to move forward, particularly with any kind of trauma, and specifically religious trauma. How have you seen that work maybe in your own life or in the life of your clients?
Yeah, well, in my own life, I didn't realize, and there are other people who have had a lot bigger trauma than I ever had. But I found that can be part of the problem is when we deny that trauma and even hesitate. I don't even want to call it a little T for me. It's still my trauma, and didn't realize until I got out of that kind of some of the baggage, some of the fear base and shame base that it had uh, that I had experienced. And those early faith leaders of mine, they're trying. This is another IFS framework too, though. They're not bad. They were doing the best that they could, and so seeing them with compassion has been helpful too. But just seeing that, yeah, that fear base, shame base, it has made an impact on me. And there were a couple Easters ago. I'll share this, and then I'll let you talk to me a little more. But where I was just Easter before last, I was just like, I don't know if I believe any of this stuff anymore. What just a very kind of crisis of faith moment, and I experienced God still holding me in that and saying, I'm not going to leave you. You're going to be okay, even if worst case scenario happens. But I had that crisis of faith. And honestly, sometimes I wish I would have become a Marin County Buddhist or something because it would be less confusing. But my love for my faith, having that
Yeah.
interaction where God would still hold me, even if I left, and it would be okay, that was what I needed. And so realizing that trauma, not minimizing it, but then coming to a point of saying, no matter what, that, God or something bigger was in charge. And for me, I've fallen in love more with Jesus and my faith because of that. And it's been healing.
So beautiful. And I really enjoy hearing stories about the work that IFS coaches are doing because I hear that kind of thing over and over again. I think our world is so good at pitting us against one another and ourselves, our faith leaders, our mentors, and our influencers. And when we understand that trauma exists and we can look at ourselves with compassion, I think it does help us move forward in a healthier way. I know that you, speaking of trauma, worked for many years, as you said, with Afghan refugees in the Bay Area, in Fremont, which is, little Kabul, even before the more recent fall of of Kabul itself, and this more recent wave. But how did your experience working with Afghan refugees and maybe some of the religious trauma there even lead you to the work that you're doing now?
Yeah. Well, the cross cultural experience has just been eye opening for me. But I found, and maybe some of my Afghan friends will even listen, but they, like the experiences that I learned with them, it has really helped me to heal and to embrace my faith. I find myself saying, they used to say, I'm okay, you're okay, everybody's okay. And that's kind of the way that I believe now. Still very much Jesus for me, and I want to share that. I'm very confident in that. But with them, just their acceptance of me for who I am, not trying to change me, there was a lot of learning and a lot of healing, and I'm just grateful for that. And even some of the religious institutions that I've worked through and with, again, much like my upbringing, there has been it's been challenging at times, but they're doing the best that they can. And I want to just see that. And so just try to be as still taking care of myself, putting myself first, prioritizing myself, but also just trying to hold everything with compassion. And I learned that a lot from some of my mission work, and I'm grateful for that.
I love it. I've learned so much from Afghan refugees too. There's something so inspiring about people coming out of something so horrible, so full of religious trauma and misogyny. I mean, some of the women I've sat with in Fremont on their couches and helping them get settled, taking them to Target to shop for things, and grateful to the mayor of Fremont who funded a lot of that work. She's a wonderful person. But also just hearing the stories of trauma has changed me as a person. It's helped me understand what it means to be human. Um, I think that any of us who've come out of high control religious environments can share some things in common. And a lot of that is working hard for emotional health. I know my particular version of it, and I don't know if you experienced this growing up evangelical or SBC specifically, but I remember as a child hearing like the whole joy analogy, Jesus first, others second, and yourself last. And as a woman, there was an extra layer on that. Our world is patriarchy and we all swim in that. And women and moms in particular are always expected to put themselves last and to just carry the emotional burden. How did you experience that kind of phrase of putting yourself last? And how was the shift for you to kind of prioritize yourself?
Yeah, and that was often it. I mean, you talk about, loving God, loving others, and you don't talk about loving yourself too much. And if you do, I don't know, you're crossing some line somewhere, wherever the lines are. And I've found that I've got to love myself. I've got to prioritize myself. If I don't do that, I can't love God and others, and there's no joy. And for the last 18 years, there are times where I could have taken a lot better care of myself. And some people even wonder why now. I'm 43 and have made this transition kind of not out of ministry. I'm still very much in ministry in this IFS calling of my beloved self, me and God together at the core from my worldview is still very much there. But the idea of prioritizing self, there's still a lot of parts of me that struggle with that. So just letting them know that, just like I do with the world, that they're young, they're doing the best that they can, but they're not alone.
It's a really good posture. I think that so often we want to shut off parts of ourselves because maybe our religious environments told us to. For me as a woman, and I would say many people listening right now who are a part of the SBC or who have been, maybe they have one foot in, one foot out. They're solidly still in and trying to figure out how to make changes, or they've left wounded over what we all saw happen recently with the Southern Baptist Convention and women pastors being used as a religious football to increase male platforms for power and money and control. And men watching that happen, and girl dads, or men who love their wives and their sisters and say what is happening, and it's hurting a lot of people. But I think so many in religious environments have had to shut off parts of themselves, and I'm thinking about women listening right now who've been told the part of themselves to shut off is the part that may have a pastoral gift, a way of caring pastoral care wise for people, or maybe a preaching or teaching gift. People like Beth Moore, who had to leave because of how she was treated for, preaching on Mother's Day and saying her convictions about Trump and that kind of thing. And so allowing those parts of ourselves that our religious environments have told us to shut off and showing compassion and allowing those to come out is such a journey. How do you work with clients on that? Or maybe how have you worked with yourself on that particular thing?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, it's helpful for me when I hear you share that of just, the hurt that women had, have had, and then most recently, last week, and it's coming out. There are parts of me that just get like, what do I say? Or who am I, a white male? I'm ashamed. And so my point is, first of all, and maybe there's some men listening, and hopefully my male parts don't open up a can of worms, but you connect me if they do, and we'll go from there. But just, there are parts of me that really love that our system is set up around patriarchy and that I'm a white male and that I'm privileged. My point is that I think sometimes we're so ashamed of those parts, or those racist parts, or transphobic, homophobic. You could go, but I have parts of me that really like that. And if I'm ashamed of them and don't bring them up, and even bringing that to this conversation, it doesn't mean they're right. They're not. They're young. They're doing the best that they can. But we've got to let those parts be heard, know who we are at ourselves. They're not who we are. They're just as lost, to speak evangelical terms, as the world we're trying to save. And that's what I found with my clients is that those in the evangelical world, to make the point that, wow, you've got those lost 7 or 8 year olds inside of you. Uh, and if we can not judge them, not try to cut them off because they're the flesh, but just invite them in, they also bring us gifts. And my white male, like patriarchy parts, they can chime in. And when I bring them up, they do. They have gifts. And there are ways that I can speak in this conversation that can bring about change. There's ways I can shut up and listen. But I need to recognize I've got those parts I'm very ashamed of. And I think if we can do that and they can connect with your parts that are polarized on the other side, that get very fearful and afraid of these parts, we're all trying to protect those little ones underneath. And that's where the healing happens. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you for being so vulnerable. I think that, Brene Brown, she's the vulnerability researcher, and it's such a funny thing, but people want that. People need that. We need that. And there's so much around shame, which is a lot of her work as well, that we don't talk about because you don't talk about shame. That's the whole point. And we keep it silenced. And in a world that truth and transparency feel rare, and especially in religious institutions. And I'm looking at you, SBC, right now. That has been something that has caused so much pain on an individual level, on a church-wide level, families. We're raising children in these environments. And when we speak the shame out loud, whether it's shame of something we've done or thought or something that's been done to us, it allows the healing to begin. And we're talking about emotional health here, but we're also talking about spiritual health, relational health. Health has so many different layers. And so when you say those parts of you out loud, it allows us to just say, okay, let's hold that. Let's hold space. Let's lament the parts of it we should. And let's be curious about how we can move forward together in a healthier way as we each express these different parts of ourselves. As you watched, over the past couple of weeks, things going on in the SBC, and you have, for a huge chunk of your life identified as being SBC, where do you stand now, and what are some of the tensions you're holding in your own self?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm as free as I've ever been in with this coaching practice and kind of being untethered, but still tethered to goodness. I don't see myself going down that slippery slope. Maybe I will, and it'll be okay too at some point. But right now, I'm still tethered to my faith, but I'm untethered from institutions and just kind of ways that I've never quite fit in. Anyway, and so it was interesting yesterday. So we go to an Episcopal church now and have for a while. I led morning prayer. Of course, I don't do communion. I'm not an ordained Episcopalian, but I told the audience that the congregants that I was ordained Southern Baptist. And I said, there are parts of me that are very ashamed to bring this up to you. And you're probably thinking, who is this whack job that has been invited to share? But the lectionary that day, and try to make this brief, but the lectionary yesterday, the gospel was Matthew 9:35 through 38. That's the only sermon I've ever preached. 6 years ago, I was in a Southern Baptist church. And so it was good to reinterpret that with this congregation and talk about our parts and the shame that came up in me for saying these parts of me that are wounded, that are still in there. And the idea of seeing the crowds, having compassion, is what Matthew 9:38 talks about, and then praying to the Lord of the harvest for workers. They're part of me that just wants to throw that whole passage out and go, or, just give me the EBGBs. But when I looked at it, I'm like, first of all, yeah, there is good news. We're beloved. We're beloved human beings. And it's okay to see the crowds, but instead of pointing out so much, it's okay to point in and see the faces inside of us so that we can accept these parts that I'm talking about. And then to see in compassion for ourselves and for others. It's not so much black and white, right or wrong, but it's, this is who I am. But there's more just freedom and just freeing. And that's what I'm feeling right now in this process. And then I let them know, of course, we can pray. And you can even set your phone to 9:38 or 10:02, depending on if you're a morning or an evening person, to pray to the Lord of the harvest, to send out workers, or maybe it's just to pray for wisdom and help, but none of that needed to be thrown out. And so I'm finding healing in this safe space, and I'm landing where I need to land in my belovedness, being that beloved human being.
It's beautiful. There's so much resurrection and finding the freedom and letting some things die in yourself that weren't serving you. Some ideologies or theologies or just ways of living in the world that weren't healthy for you and all of the parts of you, or certainly for others that were around you and have lived experience about how you were maybe treating them. And I say that about myself too. We're all on a journey. Like you said, we're doing the best we can, but we do have resources available both to gain more knowledge about others and the way the world works and ourselves, and to stay curious both about the scriptures that we read, whatever scriptures we read, right? There's ways of living in goodness and absorbing goodness in ourselves, and increasing in that kind of goodness that helps us heal. As you are hoping to find more people that you can introduce to the IFS system and approach, what are some ways that you tell people as you're trying to find more people that you can be helpful to and make a difference in their lives about why it would be important to enter into a coaching relationship with you to kind of explore these things? Kind of what's your pitch? What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah. Well, I'm finding that people are looking, even in my IFS trainings that I've had, and those parts of me that are still hold evangelical tendencies or parts that I'm ashamed of, I've found that when I bring them up and say, my background is actually seminary, I've had pastoral counseling and all, it's actually Southern Baptist Seminary. They say you don't have to defend yourself so much because we need that spiritual, just that spiritual connection, those spiritual leaders, and even in our own Christian faith. Not that I'm worried that people are going to fall off the deep end or that I need to bring them back, but that there are people out there with that pastoral sense, as white, male, patriarchal as I am, that wants to learn and wants to let people know you don't have to even be ashamed of that Christian faith that you have. You can accept those parts. They bring gifts, that framework. It's all we know, and it's okay to embrace that. And maybe others do need to see that, and maybe they want to be on that path too. Maybe not, but there's healing and there's growth there, and I'm just loving just being neutral. I'm trying not to defend myself too much because I meet with people and like, if you Google me, I used to be labeled as a missionary, and I don't want you to find that and think I'm trying to deceive you. And people say, just chill out. You don't have to share so much. We trust you. We see it. You're welcome. And so I will try to let those little parts know. That's where when I start talking too much, like I am now, kind of, it's those young little parts. And just to say, that's not who you are. You're on a team. We need you. And you can be unburdened from a lot of these burdens that you're carrying.
So good. And for the record, you weren't talking too much. You are my guest, and I want you to talk. So I did invite you on. But yeah, I love that. And yeah, it's a journey for people who are kind of switching careers like you have. Do you have any advice for somebody who might be, I don't know, I'm thinking of somebody who might be even a Southern Baptist Church pastor right now, or a Southern Baptist missionary, or they're in another evangelical denomination like Presbyterian has had some things in the last couple of weeks as well. People who are finding evangelicalism to really not be serving them in the kind of emotional and spiritual and relational health they want to have going forward. And maybe they're looking for a career change. Do you have any advice? Because I know it's not easy to have a Southern Baptist seminary degree, having worked as a missionary, and then suddenly go into something that's, not labeled, and I put in quotes, full-time paid ministry. What was your journey like, and how did you, what tools and resources helped you in the transition?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm just grateful for the organization that I'm in the process. Actually, the end of this month is my official transition, and there was healing with that organization of just kind of people will often joke and say, "Oh, that's Tim. We don't know where he fits in, but we need him." And this organization
Mm-hmm.
has been just as welcoming, and I didn't have to leave. And so there is healing in that process. And so I want to acknowledge that and just know if I can use the word blessed to, to have that. And so I'm grateful for that. And then I would just encourage people who may be in a situation where I am, where it looks like it may be time to pivot or change. First of all, just to pause and check in and speak IFS again here. Notice those parts that are coming up that maybe there's some of those parts that are so ashamed or so repulsed, so reactive that we could get to know them a little more. Like, why am I reacting this way? Why is this triggering me so bad? And I know that often people come to me for parts work, and the parts that are really crying out for attention aren't the first ones that come up. And so be aware of, just pause, be curious and compassionate. If you can, notice what is coming up, and then just trust. And I'm not trying to spiritual bypass here, I don't think, but it things there's something bigger at work than ourselves, and it's not always easy. And I don't know how this transition is going to go ultimately. There's still, it takes faith, but
Mm-hmm.
so far from my experience and looking back, and gosh, this sounds so much like the Christian story I would share at a church, but it's been beautiful, even with the trauma, the missteps, uh, and I'm just trying to trust that process moving forward in the midst of all the doubts. But I would just encourage you to, just stay curious and just know that there's something bigger going on.
It's beautiful. I think that so many of us who've gone through hard times or are currently going through suffering of various kinds, um, there often is a silver lining. There's often ways we can focus on joy and at the same time lamenting what's happening or what has happened. Sitting in the pain with curiosity and not judgment is such a great approach to healing. Nobody gets through this human life without some version of pain, and people like you who are out here helping us walk through it are are shepherding us in a particular way. That's a very Christian word,
Yeah.
but many people are familiar with Psalm 23 that the Lord is our shepherd, and we want those green pastures, and we want to be able to have, quiet waters and places that our souls can rest and find healing. And it's on some of the things they're so painful in our past that it's a lifelong journey.
Well,
Or people who have complex PTSD, for example, where it's ongoing. So yeah.
yeah, and that is, and just being aware too that you're not alone, and that there's a support within that you may not know that you have, and also without. And that's why with me trying to market the concept of pastoral coaching, that's you can't really, that pastoral word, even though if I'm honest, there are parts of me that may still have an agenda, and I'm trying to, they're young, I'm trying to ask them to soften back and learn. But just knowing that we're enough, and that you do have a pastoral coach that's really just talking about a shepherd in the field. I'm not talking about my agenda parts that may be there, but just I really want to serve others, to let them know that there are people like me who get them. I'm not going to try to push them one way or bring them back another way, but just to stay curious. And man, this sounds woo woo, doesn't it? To be and just accept who they are and know that they're loved, and that support's out there.
I love it. I love the work you're doing. It is truly beautiful. I'm sure it's going to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. I know it made a difference in my husband's life to just kind of walk through this journey with you over the last few months. And just thank you for the great work you're doing. I'm going to have you hang out and have one more question just for our Patreon supporters in a separate exclusive interview. but I'd love for us to just finish this interview out with you letting us know how we can find you for people who want to reach out to you for coaching. How does that work?
Yep, and you can just go to my website, faithfullygrowing.com, and you can find, there are other ways to connect with me there, but if you go there, you can find out more information, and you can always drop me an email to tim@faithfullygrowing.com, and I would love to connect further.
And you also have a podcast, so let us know how to find you there.
Yes, and so if you first of all, if you go to that website, it will have a place where you can click on the podcast. But it's, if you type in IFS, as in Internal Family System, Insights and Meditations, I alternate. One week I'll give you some insight into the model, and on another week some lead you in a meditation. And so would love to interact with you there for sure. So IFS, Insights and Meditations on your podcast app should pull it up.
Love what you're doing, Tim. Thank you for just this conversation, helping us be curious, not judgmental about ourselves and others, and for the great work you're doing. You really are making a difference.
Yeah, well, grateful for the opportunity, and thank you again.
As you sit and think about what came up for you during this episode, especially understanding more about IFS and the internal family systems approach that Tim is involved with in coaching. And as you think about just this point of view where we think about the mind and how the mind is made up of these relatively discrete subpersonalities, each with its own unique viewpoint and qualities. I think the reason that so many people have found this particular method so helpful is if we think about the movie Inside Out. And if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to go watch it. It allows us to hold space for all the different emotions and feelings that come up for us as human beings. And if you remember in our previous episode with Becky Castle Miller, who's doing her doctoral research around emotions as expressed in the New Testament, in the book of Luke specifically, I know that many of us are often taught to push away our feelings, or different cultures around the world, like Becky had mentioned, allow us to express those or even define those either individually or relationally. But I think what's important is what Tim talked about with us in this episode is that we acknowledge these feelings as they come up with curiosity and not judgment. And so I hope that you're doing that for yourself today. This is one of the many ways we can move forward in a more emotionally healthy way to strive for happiness wherever we are. I know that many of you around the world are trying to work for emotional health and happiness in those that you work with. The reason that maybe you moved to Africa or Asia, or the reason that you became a therapist here in the United States, or maybe the reason you went to become a professor in a university, the reason you started that business or work in government is because you're working for flourishing for humans around you. And I wanted us to take time during this series to focus on our own flourishing, because my understanding of what Jesus was telling us in the scriptures when he was asked, what are the greatest commandments? It was to, love God, but love our neighbor as ourselves. And that includes loving ourselves. And that's the part we often leave out, especially for you moms out there. I know many of you put yourselves last. You make everybody's doctors and dental appointments and then finally get around to your own. But I just want all of us, whether you're a parent or whether you're not, to focus on yourself. Even sometimes single people can be pressured to just completely give all of your time and resources to everyone else. And we're just taking this series as a chance to focus on emotional health, both for ourselves and for others around us, because it's so important. We often don't get that message. And we're often told to just burn ourselves out for the sake of everyone else. So as we think about the things that Tim was telling us today, I'd really be curious to know what's coming up for you, how you're processing it. And we will, of course, go a little bit deeper with him as I ask him a deeper question and an exclusive episode that will be available to those of you who are in our Difference Maker community. And once again, you're always welcome to show up there to go a little bit deeper with us. Your perspective means so much to me when you show up there. And it means so much to the rest of us in the community when you can comment on these exclusive episodes that we drop for the different tier levels. Starting at $5 a month, you can be a changer in that difference maker community. And it just makes a difference for me and for all of us when you show up there. So once again, warmly welcomed into this community. And you can go there at www.patreon.com/a world of difference. Anyway, so glad to have Tim Fortescue on today. He's a friend. He's got a great reputation here in the Bay Area, especially among the Afghan community, because he served and worked here for so long, really toward human flourishing with those around him. And so I'm excited about the work he's doing now as a coach. So please reach out to him for coaching. He's the kind of person who really does hold space and curiosity for the humans that he interacts with wherever they are in the world. So please reach out to him. We'll put his information in the show notes so you can find Tim and go a little bit deeper with him on the IFS system. And once again, you can find him at www.faithfullygrowing.com. All right, everyone, wherever you are in the world, I appreciate you. I'm so happy that you show up here. It makes such a difference to me when you listen and when you share these episodes with those around you that you want to have the conversation with, or just maybe somebody that you feel like, ooh, they could really use this episode. So would love to hear about if you're sharing that with other people as well. And you could always let us know about that, of course, in the A World of Difference podcast community called Difference Makers. We love having you show up there and tell us about what you're doing and how you're sharing the episodes as well. Anyway, have a great week, everyone. We'll talk again next week, and keep making a difference wherever you are. As we're finishing this episode, if you're thinking, I really wish I could learn more or go a little bit deeper, well, that's what our Difference Maker community is for. I would love to welcome you in to join the rest of us there. Once again, it's only $5 a month to join, the price of a latte at your local coffee shop. You can join at our Changers tier. Difference Makers is a community that really means so much to me. It's very special because each time I have a guest on the show, I record something outside of what we give to just the regular podcast audience, where we go a little bit deeper. And then I post those video episodes in this community and we can discuss them. But also at the very beginning tier, which is our Changers tier of this community, you'll get exclusive voting power and help pick podcast topics that give us, more of what we want from your perspective. You'll have access to exclusive 30 plus mini-sodes that aren't out there for the general public. And you'll get every month an exclusive monthly bonus mini-sode. At our Groundbreakers level, which is $10 a month, you can join and get all of that, but also priority access to submit questions to the podcast. And you'll get an additional 2 exclusive monthly bonus mini-sodes. And at our Trailblazers tier, which is $15 a month, the price of 3 lattes a month, you can get all of that, plus also 3 exclusive monthly bonus minisodes and a patron shout out. So I would love for you to join us at any of those tiers. It'll help you come into this community, be in the midst of all of us, other difference makers, and we'd love to hear your perspective. I certainly would. It's a place to engage more with me and the audience around what you like, what you're resonating with, and once again, go deeper with each of our guests. So please join us in this membership community. I would love to hear your perspective and love to share this extra content with you. So show up at patreon.com/a world of difference.